Good afternoon. Everybody able to hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, welcome to the Automated Interactive Sessions Roundtable session. The first sponsor for this session is Fortinet. That are one of our platinum sponsors. Fortinet secures the largest enterprise service provider and government organizations around the world. They empower its customers with intelligent, seamless protection across the expanding attack surface and the power to take on ever-increasing performance requirements of the borderless network today and into the future. Be sure to check them out over in the business partners section and make sure you tell them how much you appreciate them supporting NCLGISA. I guess we'll get this kicked off, and whenever anyone wants to chime in, just jump right in. So what are you using in your environment, if anything, as far as automated services? Anything? Are you using anything like chatbots or so? How are you utilizing that?
This is John with the City of High Point. We're not currently using anything, but we're looking to explore using those sort of things.
Yeah, that's one thing. I've done a couple of sessions or attended a couple of sessions at previous conferences about chatbots, and that's something I'd be interested to learn more about and the different ways to use those in our environment. It looks like we still got some members coming in.
I mean, my personal preference, and this is entirely personal, is that I can't stand those things. They waste my time because nothing beats talking to a real person. You can jump right to the point. You don't have to play 100 questions and, all of those sort of things. So I'm more interested less in chatbots than I am any kind of reporting tools or things where AI is evaluating data and making decisions in the background, making recommendations.
Okay. Is there anyone that can comment on that or?
Michael Kane at Wake County. We don't have anything in production today when it comes to that, but our data teams are currently looking at leveraging most of the Microsoft data stuff in Azure. So Azure SQL, just as an option, is one to store data, as well as all the machine learnings and all the kind of bells and whistles that you can do with Azure. Those are on our roadmap for testings and evaluations and et cetera for the next couple of months to try and figure out if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's one thing I've read some about as far as the Azure automation, but Azure was not something we use in our environment, so it's not something I've really followed up on.
It would literally be our first foray into actual Azure. So it's currently still in pilot, but it's interesting. It has some potential to do some things that you can't do in other ways. It's ultimately, we're thinking of allowing it to just back end our Power BI stuff and allow some heavier data lift by offloading all that stuff to Azure.
I think we've been using it for 6 months, under a year, and that's mostly handled with the infrastructure side of the house. But on the application side, we had someone that was big into automation, and He had, and I say had because he's no longer with us, started to and did complete some of these things. He called them robots, and he connected them with payroll notifications and simple requests and things of that nature, announcements, and every department had their own robot with their own name. Like if you got your payroll notification, it came from Stanley. If you had another notification from HR, it came from, I forget that robot's name. And all these things were tied to processes in the background. If you updated your profile to HR, then you would get your confirmation back that way. But those efforts have kind of stalled because our in-house expert is no longer with us, and we've been working to pick up the pieces and carry forward. So if you have an expert that does this sort of thing, it's very, we've learned the hard way. Make sure that there's cross training.
Right. Any other guests currently utilizing automation as far as in Azure?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, before the session began, I was trying to come up with some additional questions as far as what to ask, and was starting to draw blanks there. I guess being towards the end of the day is starting to catch up with me.
I'll just throw out one for conversation then. It's not Azure related, but it's an on-prem thing. Automating of user onboarding and offboarding. That's to me, that's always been a very low-hanging fruit that could be capitalized if that was something that organizations would want to do. I'm curious who is successfully fully automating their onboard and offboard. And in disclosure, we got about 80 to 90% of the way there, but we're not fully automated.
High Point just completed that automation of onboarding. I don't know if we've got the offboarding piece component in place yet, but we used HP Form, or we call it HP Forms, Laserfiche. We rebrand everything. I don't know why, but it helped tremendously and has eliminated so many bottlenecks and sped up the process to the point where once an offer is made and a candidate accepts, there's just, even before they get here, they're already in the system. Their equipment's already been authorized. All their logins have been set up. Their payroll direct deposit's been set up. Everything's, before they even show up for their first day, all that's been done because it's all these automated processes kick off in the background with HP Forms, Laserfiche. Definitely worth the effort.
That would be something I'd be interested in. Our process right now is still a lot of manual entry.
Well, the one thing, and I had mentioned this in another meeting earlier today, with, it was the low code, no code discussion. Laserfiche has been around for decades, and they're kind of the Cadillac of this whole philosophy, or this type of automation. In essence, and I own no stock in the company. I have no gain to be made from advocating their use. But you can take any paper process, it doesn't matter, any PDF form. Oh, and that's one thing that I specialize in. If I see a PDF form that any department's using, especially one of those fillable PDF forms, I pounce on it and I kill it and I put it into Laserfiche because it's now in a central location. It has IT oversight. It has consensus. Security can get involved if it's to make sure we're not exposing ourselves to any risk or lawsuits or anything silly or frivolous. Doing something like that, any kind of workflow, and there's a whole nother sub application to Laserfiche called Laserfiche Workflow, where you can go crazy, absolutely crazy with automation and get super fancy. I don't even know that part of it. I just worked on their basic, simplest tier to their suite, I guess, and that's Laserfiche Forms. And that's a slight learning curve. It's not too difficult, but once you get the gist of it, and it does not take long at all. Anyone in IT in particular, but even I'm training users in other departments to create their own forms and automating their own processes, because you have these web forms that you create without knowing a single lick of HTML. And then you can connect working complicated process flows to that form and additional forms. You can get, it can be as ugly and convoluted as you want, or as simple and eloquent as you want. It's all up to what the user, what their needs are, what the process is, and how much IT wants to be involved in steering this and pruning the tree so it grows into something beautiful. You have total flexibility. So it's just been my experience that Laserfiche Forms has been a godsend. I've learned, I don't know what school it was, some university, and they're not a small one. I had read somewhere in one of the Laserfiche forums that they took their entire student application process. And if any of you remember what it used to be like, if you're my age anyway, applying to schools was 100 pages of stuff you had to fill out and mail and back and forth. They took that entire process and digitized it with HP Forms, or Laserfiche. I'm sorry. I've been trained on what to call Laserfiche. The rebranding was a success. They took that entire student application process and digitized it through all of the approvals and all of the workflows, front to back, top to bottom, 100% digital, and they've not looked back. And that, when I read that, that's when my wheels started turning. Hey, there's so many things we could do for this city, onboarding being one of them. And our HR director, he totally agreed. And I helped teach him how to make his own forms. He's a director. He doesn't have time to piddle with such things, but he liked the concept and was so enamored of the idea. He had no problems doing something that traditionally an IT-ish person would kind of do. It's that simple. Anyone can do it. And together we've worked out the forms and converted from a PDF into the Laserfiche form and connected the dots underneath. Who's this route to? Who needs to approve it? What happens if it's rejected? All of the ifs and thens and elses in a workflow. Definitely worthwhile to investigate. I don't know if Laserfiche has a trial version or a demo. I highly recommend it.
Now, like, is that stored, as far as the documents, is that stored on-prem or, storing in the cloud?
It's however you choose to have it set up. I don't know about costs, and nobody from our infrastructure team can check me and make sure I'm being correct. But the way we have it set up, it's on a SQL server, and everything goes to its own repository, its own database. Whether or not that ends up getting backed up to a cloud, or if it actually goes into the cloud, I don't know. And I'm in ITs, but to me, it's transparent, and that's all I care about. I can get to the repository. I can manipulate the data, do reporting. There's very crude reporting that comes standard with Laserfiche forms. I know that our resident expert, because I created a bunch of stuff for finance with payroll, and that if you're talking PII data, hello, that's, nothing's more personal than someone's paycheck. I didn't know he could do this, but from talking with the finance department and their concerns, we were able to lock down and give very specific access to just the people in finance who are handling the paper forms before. And the other neat thing to Laserfiche is, prior to all this digitization, they're now asking, what do we do with these 10 file cabinets behind us that are filled with all of these documents we can't get rid of? We must hold on to forever. So there's a part of Laserfiche, I don't know if it's another add-on or it's some part of the Laserfiche world, where they can take these payroll documents and requests and scan them in bulk, a whole stack at a time. And Laserfiche will do OCR and pull out all of the data and fill out a form as if it were using our process that's currently in place. So all of this old data now gets digitized, and it's stored in the repository in the same place with the same restricted access in SQL Server or wherever you may want it to be stored. And I can't say anything about the pricing. I know that it's expensive, and they used to have licenses. Everybody in the city, every employee had a full license, and that went undiscovered for a long time, until we did a self-audit and discovered we didn't need to be paying for all those licenses. So make sure you don't do that mistake. It was an honest one, but yeah. And I wish, I mean, there's someone, we have a lot of vendors that come into these conferences. I think they would be a good candidate to invite in and see if they would have an interest in giving a demo or hawking their wares or solutions. They've been around for a long, long time, and they're very, very solid.
I know you had mentioned as far as the onboarding and offboarding, as far as that type of workflow being automated. What are some of the other workflows that any of y'all have looked at as far as automating?
I'll answer that in a few seconds. If well, I need to log in. Hold on, I got kicked off my VPN. Connect.
Good question from Gilbert in the chat section about can workflow be modular to add-on feature function as requirements and annual budgeting?
I'm not entirely sure what you mean, Gilbert. Not that I'm an expert, and I do not intend to monopolize this conversation. But if there's silence, I'm going to fill the void. So if you don't want to hear my voice, speak up. Here we go. I finally got into the. Go ahead.
This is Joe with City Wilson. I think one of the, when I think automated, I think one of the basic or simple tasks that we've done is that we use Excel And Excel has a forms-based document, cloud-based document where users can basically customize the forms for anything. And that adds the ability to even have an address or a point location where that happens. And so we've automated the street closings. You know, you wouldn't think that street closings would have to, what will go a lot into it, but that particular project required connecting with public safety, public resources, all of our utility groups to use that application to be able to close and be responsible for reopening the street. And the big thing that we got out of that is we got the ability to centralize all of the street closing information. We basically do a public pool of the data through their API using SQL. And we pull that data in and we can use it in various different ways so that everyone is updated on which streets are open, which streets are closed. And this is really critical when we have severe weather. So when we look at some of the applications that are touching that particular data, we can see that in a short span of time, in 24 hours, we're looking like in the thousands of hits on those applications, such as the web applications or data-centric applications that use that particular data. So some of the simpler things that we've done. And again, it's just basically using SQL and some custom applications to pull the data out through their API.
That's an excellent example. We use Acela also. I think our planning and development, they're the primary holders or users of that application. But it does have forms within it. And a lot of these bigger enterprise applications have incorporated a feature like Laserfiche forms. And you can use them to do the things that you suggested, the exact same things. The only difference with Laserfiche is it's dedicated just to form creation, and you can use that in an API to connect it to any other application that needs to know or is part of the workflow. One of the problems that we're working on solving is our public services department's got many divisions to it, and they're looking for new software. And we also have apparently one of the few municipalities in the state that we're responsible for our own utilities. And so we've got Kayenta, which does utilities and billing and all of that sort of stuff. So if we have a work order or service order coming in from, it could be a broken fire hydrant, streets needs to be notified. The questions come in, which system is kicking off the workflow? And that's one of the things we're wrestling with, is what's going to be our system of record. Because if public services is going to buy this new application suite and pay big money for it, what happens to workflows that get started in public services that also need to go to electric and Kayenta, that also need to go to the fire department because one of their hydrants is now, out of commission. So there's a lot of different systems and departments that need to be connected. And one thing I like about Laserfiche is, and this is just my opinion and my recommendation for the city, is that we find one place that's going to be the starting gate for all of these forms. It lets you create public facing forms, as does Kayenta, as does some of these other solutions that we're looking at for public services, as does Acela from what I hear. But who is going to be the front? Things have got to come into one place and then get routed where they need to go. And I think that's a question that anyone needs to consider when they're looking at all these different options. One big example here that I'm looking at all the list of forms I've created. We've got 108 that we made for the city, which is, I don't know if that's a lot or not. But one of the things that I was involved in, it's an incident report. And The fire department had their own, the police department had their own, health and services had their own. If it involved an employee, HR was involved. So you had these 4 different departments that were all basically doing the same thing. And I looked at the PDF forms, the bane of my existence, PDFs. They all were using the same PDF form, but one had the fire stamp on it, one had the police logo on it. Some fields were a little different. And I said, well, we've got duplication in 4 different departments, keeping track of the same information in 4 different places. Sounds to me like this is a great candidate for a automated process. So I used Laserfiche and I literally printed out each PDF in front of me and copied it, basically made a form that contained all the information, and anyone who is reporting any kind of an incident, employee side, can go to the form and it asks you questions. It's kind of like TurboTax. If you ever use TurboTax, guided questions, which I guess kind of relates to chatbots, sort of. And it says, what do you want to do? Are you reporting an accident? Are you reporting an injury? If they check both boxes, different parts of the form now appear for them to fill out information. And depending on what they've filled out and what they've checked off, that determines paths in the workflow underneath on who gets notified and who needs to approve it. And if it's a fire incident, you know, talk about regulations and things that have to be done in a very specific way and routed a certain way in triplicate. And supervisors also have to fill out their forms, and it's made things a whole lot easier. Ironically, and I know we're coming up on 5. Good Lord, sorry, I told you I can talk your ears off. The ironic thing about automating things is I call it the fear factor. A lot of people who've been in different departments that you've been supporting have been doing things a certain way for a very long time, and they're used to their paper forms and they prefer them. And it takes a lot of, I don't want to say hand holding, but confidence building and trust that they now will trust this new process. A lot of testing, a lot of hand holding to get them to understand that this is going to help them and save them time and allow them to access their records much further on. Oh, what's another good one? 911. There we go. They can get another example of automation. When a 911 event occurs, there's audio recordings that are made. Currently now, the way we were doing it is the operator that took the call, they're saving the file in their Outlook account. It's secure, but what happens if someone else needs that information for whatever reason? It could be for a court case, it could for anything. It becomes very difficult now to track down and find that audio recording. So now we've had a form made so that a 911 operator, as soon as the call is done, opens up the form, fills out some brief details, uploads the audio, and now it is, when they hit submit, that information is captured and stored in a secure database location. SQL Server is what we're using, and it might even be Azure in the future. I don't know, where it's now searchable, and only authorized people can find it on keyword. And I think there's even a tool that will transcribe the WAV files that get saved. I don't think they've activated it yet, but Laserfiche is very, very helpful for us.
Just a question as far as like your forms or your documents in that environment. Like if you go through and say you update one of those, is there a way, does it, like a notification, automatically get pushed out to the users, alerting them that a new form is available or a revised version?
We use Git and Git repository to keep backups and versioning and version control. It's actually seamless to the users. If there's a change in a form, That's usually been requested because the director or someone who is making those kind of decisions and authorizing revisions to a form, it could be a battalion chief, as someone who's got the authority to do that, says, I want to change this form, it's wrong. We just go ahead and with their guidance, make the change. And to anyone that has access to the form, they don't ever know that there's been a change. If it's something that significant that requires a notice or education or teaching, we send out an email blast and invite, questions back to help people adjust to a major change in a form. But usually there's no need for that. Most of the forms are so simple and self-explanatory. We make them as they're self-guided. Every form that we make, and I guess this is the most important takeaway, if you're going to make a form, make it self-guided. And if you don't know what that is, do a trial download of TurboTax and see how it asks you questions and guides you into doing your own taxes. That's the philosophy we use for any form that we put out.
It's cool.
I don't own any stock in TurboTax either, but I highly recommend it. It saves you a buttload of money.
Now, do y'all have like a process in place as far as reviewing and improving the documents or before they're, put into the system? Or
We're working on that. Like I said, we've only got 108 active forms out there, which isn't really a lot when you consider a city or a county or how much work all the different people are doing and how much paper's there. We're starting to, and the reason why this is coming up is we had our payroll form. Learning curve testing comes into play here. Someone had tricked someone else into changing someone's payroll, an employee's payroll, and the employee did not authorize that and had no idea that it was happening. So from that learning point, we've now involved SecOps, and we're forming committees begrudgingly because no one's got time for this, but it's something unfortunately that needs to be done, where any kind of impact form, anything that's going to have any PII in it, anything that we don't want to get anyone in trouble for, we need that committee to review the final form before it goes public, even if it's just employees, as far as going public goes. We want to make sure that all holes have been accounted for. And sometimes you need oversight from someone in a different department because you don't see the forest through the trees. You're deep in the weeds here, and it's real easy to miss something or create the opportunity for mischief when you weren't aware that it was even possible to do such a thing.
or anybody, you have an automated process in place for as far as like managing records, retention, and storage?
I can say that's one thing that we haven't done. And again, not plugging the Laserfiche suite, but their most file cabinets of old payroll requests going back 20 years that they can't get rid of for some reason. They're scanning them in, digitizing them, and then they're going to work on a policy from that point forward. The difference being, once it's digital and the dates have been scanned in OCR, it becomes very simple to say any record older than 7 years gets purged and deleted, shredded digitally. If you've got file cabinets, it becomes very difficult to determine when something is retained and what meets that cutoff, because you've got someone that has to sit there and flip through each each single record looking at the date field. And that only invites, yeah, that's not a job that I would want to have. And if anyone knows of any other products beside Laserfiche, trust me, we're always open to hear about similar products, because they might be very much better in the way of cost effectiveness.
It's like I've read, and I think it may have been on the listserv about the Laserfiche pricing being rather pricey.
It is. I said that from the get-go. But also to the point that of getting what you pay for. The city hasn't said goodbye. I mean, it's become that powerful and that valuable. And we've explored using Acela's form. We've looked at our other applications that do similar things. We use Reich for project management. And again, I don't own stock in this tool, but we reviewed project management applications out there literally for over a year. There are hundreds, and we looked at every single one. I kid you not. Reich rose to the top every single time. It's got its own forms in it and automated processes and workflows. It's very, very powerful, but it's still, Laserfiche is the Cadillac of all Cadillacs. And if you have that much of a need for it, it's worth it, but you have to justify that cost there again. And it sat unused for many a year with us before we realized what kind of gem we had in our toolkit. But you've also got to have people that see the value in it and say, hey, this looks, let me work with this, let me try this out, and grab a hold of it. We didn't have a champion for the tool for many years.
Anybody have maybe like a solution, an automated solution as far as getting changes for vendors in a system like vendor contracts? Or
This is John again. You know how much I hate silence. But it's funny that you mentioned that, because there was our engineering services. They have an application that was written probably in the 80s or maybe the 90s. And someone who worked for a sister city of ours wrote the application, and we liked it so much that we actually paid him to quit his job in the sister city. And I'm not naming names because I don't want it to be known. We stole him and brought him into our fold. And he wrote the software that we are still using to this day, that he no longer maintains. He's since retired. It manages contracts and proposals and things of that nature. And we desperately need to get off of it because it's old software and it's running server 2000 or something ridiculous. And infrastructure is hounding me to please get us off of that server because it's a big security risk.
right.
And they've had to do extraordinary things to maintain its security. That's even possible. And I'm trying to call up, I looked at probably over 100, and there are, again, so many. And that's the problem nowadays. If you go look at software, there's so many choices. It's just exploded in the last 5 or 6 years to do anything. Cobblestone was one that kept coming to mind. Oh, and it's funny that this topic is brought up because it's almost becoming, we're using Reich, and we've of course rebranded it to HP Docket. We call it the docket because if something's not on the docket, it doesn't exist and we're unaware of it. Docket is where we're putting any project, whether it's proposed or something that we're actually in progress and doing and working on. Where was I going with this? I don't even know. Oh, Cobblestone. There's a lot of, I'm trying to find some names to throw out. And I'm going into Outlook to do this because prior to using Reich, everything that I was working on was stored in my massive Outlook account, my file cabinet here. Oh, but one of the things with choosing software that it's become a process in and of itself, because we had no formal process for if a department wanted to use a piece of software, they would literally go out on their own without bringing IT in tow or anyone else and just look at stuff and do demos and choose something and say, well, we're putting this on our budget, we're buying this. And then once it was bought and paid for, throw it to IT. Oh, by the way, we bought this. We need your help on how to use it. Which is, the cart leading the horse here. We've changed our approach, and now we collaborate and work with the departments if they express the desire or need to get out of software. There's a whole process, a whole blueprint that I've created in our project scheduling app, Reich, or HP Docket. And it starts from the moment the initial request, the thought is made, hey, we really are tired of using this. What else is out there? Is there anything else out there? And it goes from that point all the way to 1 year later when a new choice was chosen and selected and implemented. So once that initial request comes in, there's a workflow, there's a whole process and sequence of events, tasks that build on one another, that help guide the department into making a sound solution that fits within budget, that can get approval from all the various committees and hurdles that it must overcome, and before we even get to implementing it. There's a lot of automation and things in Reich, and they do offer free trials. Again, I highly recommend it. And I looked at several hundred I screened for IT departments use. And I did this on my own because prior to this, we had no central place. A couple of people used Microsoft projects to track their work. We had a couple other people that would use spreadsheets. It all depended on who you talk to, and there was no oversight, no consensus as to what IT was really doing. No one could see the big picture. Right. And it's a very useful tool to let you do that. I suppose you could do, well, it's very useful for questions like you've asked, how do you do document management? Well, that can become a project in Reich, and you can start inviting people who might have a say-so, or you want to be involved in the discussion, and you can start scheduling tasks and things. Well, we need to review, we need to demo some things, we need to get approvals. All of those things can be tied to the task, and they're all automated. So once this phase or once this task is complete, the next one queues up automatically, and whoever it's been assigned to gets a notification that, hey, they're done looking at vendors and they've chosen this vendor. You need to now reach out to said vendor and work with their implementation team and, get another project set up. It's it's a very powerful tool, and there's a lot of automation built into it that might help with. And I don't know if anyone else is having this issue with Microsoft Project, which is a powerful tool. It lets you do so much, but for me, it's always getting lost in the weeds and the details. I don't need to know the minute by minute minutia of a project from A to Z. That to me is you're getting lost in the details. If you're more a smaller organization in particular, you like to move in an agile fashion and turn quickly. Something like Rike allows you to do that because it's not keeping track of these details. Unless you want to, you can, but then, why not just go with Microsoft Project?
Right. Yeah, just pulled up the participant list. I think we are the only 2 left in here. So,
well, if you're interested in any of these tools that I mentioned, I'll be more than happy, to give you candid feedback on what our learning process and learning curves and why we ended up choosing them. They were not decisions we made lightly, and we vetted like crazy on finding these solutions. So I'm more than happy. Just shoot me an email or reach out to me any way that you want, and I'll give you the rundown.
yeah, that would be great. I'd be interested, especially if they have a free trial, to be up for giving it a test run in our environment to see if maybe some of those would be a good fit for us.
I think Rike will help you out if you're not using something like that already, or if you're using projects and it's just too, forgive the French, too damn cumbersome.
Yeah.
Rike is you're definitely your horse.
All right. Well, so about 10 minutes left, but I guess we could go ahead and clear out. I'd like to thank our second sponsor for this session, Sirius. They're one of our gold sponsors. They're a national integrator of technology-based business solutions that span the enterprise, including the data center and lines of business. Built on products and services from the world's top technology companies, Sirius solutions are installed, configured, and supported by our dedicated teams of highly certified experts. So be sure to check out Sirius Solutions in the business partners section.
Thanks, Taylor.
Thanks, John.
Have a great day.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.